well, I was hoping I could.
No, actually, you did answer quite a few of the questions, and you and I have chatted on this before, but I do want to say I appreciate the work of the group. I was on a working group the last time that we didn't get to this point, or we got to this point, but it didn't pass. But I want to say thank you for the nights and weekends putting this together. I know it's not easy, especially when people come from different points in their conversation. So, also want to say thank you to the Central Valley Community Foundation for the letter that you provided. It was, I thought, very well written, spelled out some succinct points, and I think that's very, very helpful for the board. And I also want to say that I know this process has expanded since the last time I spoke on it, considerably, in fact. And so I do have some questions about it. But you know, what's going to drive my final decision when we vote on a measure at this COG is not the personalities involved who put the measure together, because we can agree to disagree and still do what's right for the overall good of this county and the people living. And what also is not going to drive it is the process. It's not going to drive my decision. What is going to drive it is who makes the final decision on this, because I think the people on this body were elected by the people they serve to make that decision, and we're going to be held accountable by them. And then secondly is what that measure looks like. I want to make sure, you know, I represent 53% of the population in Fresno County. I have to make sure, just like Supervisor Butterfield, that this measure meets the needs of the people that I represent, and I too hear about the potholes in the roads and all the things that are there, but I also represent a very large transportation agency that receives about $15 million a year from Measure C. And if not for that, we would not be able to provide the level of services that we do for people who are in need of transportation, people that need to get to the doctor, people that need to get to school, people that need to go grocery shopping. So I see things a little different than maybe some other parts of our county that don't have a transportation system. And so that's really where I stand. But I do have I did have some concerns about the expansion of the steering committee, not from a point of is it manageable, because if you get a good facilitator, you can manage it. I did get concerned about whether or not adding 12 people all at once was going to allow for a voting block of people. And I've talked to the Transportation for All folks. They shared with me that it's from the representatives are from their various sectors, similar to what we have established here on this board. I think what, for me, I represent 53% of the people. I got 3 folks on the steering committee. And so I just want to make sure that whatever we do going forward, we don't have voting blocks, because voting blocks serve to do nothing more than stymieing a process. The question I do have is on a couple of questions on the steering committee. How much interaction will they have an opportunity to interact with the experts? And I say that because sometimes the community, at least when I meet with them, they have an expectation that's way out here in terms of what we can do with the funding, but there's a reality of what we can deliver, and it's because of the costs associated with projects. They need to know what a pavement condition index is. They need to know the difference between a slurry seal and why we do that on roads that maybe are 7 or 8 years old as compared to maybe an older street that's being neglected. They need to know what the difference is between a mill and overlay and a mill and repave, all those things that get to become really, really expensive. And we just passed in our budget a $100 million bond, because we have a $1.5 billion deficit in terms of our streets, 1.2 billion, and 300 million of sidewalks. So we need Measure C desperately, and we needed this Measure C as well in the future. The question is, what happens during the large community review? There's a review that occurs, as I understand. There's a community input, feedback, and then they go back to the large community and understand they happen in mid-session. What happens at that point if there's large-scale opposition or dissension in terms of what the measure looks like? Can that community override it?
No. it's a.
As we're part of the committee.
Well, I like
You
to
know,
talk.
you know what I didn't, it says on their review approval, but they don't have, the authority to approve. It's still input of what they're seeing. And I think maybe, Lynn, go ahead and address that, cause it says review on the staff report. I also noticed that it did say approval in the staff report, the one that I was.
So it says the community reviews it and then approves it, and the question is, what happens if they don't?
So this little beautiful document says review.
Yes.
It's like the last chance for people to weigh in. There's no approval, there's no vote, there's no, so everybody says, I think we should have flying cars.
So the
All
staff
in favor?
report needs to reflect.
Mentioned it to Robert, but it was already too late, it already had gone out, so it is supposed to be reviewed, that's why the flow chart
Sure.
shows the review.
Okay. And really the last point, the steering committee brings forth recommendations to this body. I'm not worried about minor things, minor tweaks, but what happens if they come forth with major changes that this body wants to make? Or is this body able to do that? The committee comes back, percentages that they should be funded at. And here is the percentage of funding for Reedley, Sanger, Selma, Fowler, Fresno, rural Fresno County. And then all of a sudden in this body, we say, no, we don't agree. We think we should change it by 5%, 8%. Is that going to look like a rejection of the steering committee and the community?
I'll do that. I would say, no, they're advisory, and the process is iterative, so they're gonna meet, and then we're gonna kind of say, hey, this is what we're seeing from them, maybe we should talk about this more next time, so that they don't come here, it may not be a perfect match, but we all can decide. I also think, this is the opinion of Lynn Ashford only, that I do think we're gonna need kind of a subset to do allocations, because the municipal allocations are super complicated, and I don't think you could ever educate a steering committee in enough time to go, well, no, it's 53%, there's road miles or all of that. So I could imagine that we would create some kind of a subset, or Kendall would create a subset to do allocations, so that number is more
Wouldn't the
accurate when it
representative,
comes.
like
But
he said he has
it's
to be on
subject
the
to change,
steering
and their
committee,
role
wouldn't
is
they be doing
advisory.
this job?
If we learn something
Why
from their
don't we have to
advice,
start
you know,
over?
that makes us go, we never thought about it that way, you should do it by number of stop signs, whatever they come up with, we might go, that's interesting, but I think it's open to change.
I think the best part of this is not just the fact that we're united, because the chance of one measure passing versus two is a lot greater. And the other thing that I think is going to be helpful for all of us is an accelerated process to where by September 11th, we're gonna know what this measure looks like. And if at that point in time, we decide, hey, we can't live with it, then we gotta go to a plan B. And I hope it doesn't get to that, quite frankly. But at the end of the day, I look forward to seeing what this process looks like along the way, prepared to support it tonight. And I just wanna make sure that, that we have the final report. Thank you.
Thank you. They have access to experts. At the top of this diagram, you see where it says the embedded steering committee are members of the subcommittee, the technical subcommittee, so that in the last measure, the subcommittee lived in their own bubble and never really interacted with the steering committee and crafted a plan kind of on their own. And this is to integrate the experts with the steering committee, because there are things that people just don't have any idea. They have no way to know, nor would we expect them to. So embedding them throughout is important as well.